Have you ever felt that within you lives a wounded child? That part of your being that still carries the echo of words you heard when you were just beginning to discover the world. Carl Jung, one of the most profound analytical psychologists in our history, discovered something fascinating. Within each of us dwells an inner child, that pure essence that holds our earliest emotions, our deepest fears, and our most genuine dreams. Today, I want to speak directly to that child who lives within you. Yes, to that part of your being that perhaps you've ignored for years while trying to be who everyone expected you to be. Because according to Jung, reconciling with our inner child isn't optional. It's the necessary path toward individuation, toward becoming who we truly are. Think for a moment. When was the last time you stopped to listen to your inner child? Not your adult mind, always analytical and practical. Not that voice telling you what you should do. I'm referring to that intuitive and emotional part that Jung identified as essential for our complete psychological development. Your inner child holds memories that your conscious mind may have forgotten. Jung discovered that these early memories form part of what he called the personal unconscious, that layer of our psyche where forgotten experiences reside but continue influencing our decisions, our fears, and how we relate to others. The child is the father of the man, wrote Jung, inspired by Wordsworth. With this, he teaches us something powerful. The child you once were continues to shape the woman you are today. When we don't recognize this connection, when we ignore those vulnerable parts of ourselves, we create what Jung called the shadow, that repository of rejected aspects that eventually emerge in unexpected ways in our lives. Dear inner child, I know you've been waiting a long time for someone to listen to you, for someone to acknowledge your pain. Jung understood that many of our deepest emotional wounds occur in childhood, when we are most vulnerable and lack the tools to process complex experiences. These wounds don't simply disappear because we've grown up. They remain in our unconscious, manifesting as repetitive patterns, as relationships that don't work, as that emptiness you sometimes feel and can't explain. Many of us learn from an early age to ignore our needs. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where expressing your emotions wasn't safe. Maybe you learned that to receive love, you had to be perfect. Or perhaps you absorbed the belief that your dreams were too big, too impossible. Jung understood that these messages become what he called complexes, cores of emotion-charged psychic energy that influence our adult life in ways we don't even consciously perceive. Today, I want to tell you something important. You are not alone in that pain. Jung discovered that beyond the personal unconscious, there exists what he called the collective unconscious, that shared network of human experiences that transcends cultures and eras. In that common space, we all know the pain of rejection, the joy of genuine love, the need to feel seen and valued. Your pain is not yours alone. It's part of the universal human experience that connects us all. Do you remember when you were a child and dreamed without limits? That capacity to imagine entire worlds, to believe everything was possible. Jung called it the transcendent function, that innate ability to connect with possibilities beyond our immediate reality. Over time, many women lose this connection. We become what Jung would call personas, social masks we wear to fit in, forgetting who we really are. But there's something you should know. It's never too late to reconnect with that dreaming child. Jung firmly believed in our capacity for what he called individuation, that process of psychological integration that leads us to reconcile all parts of our being. It's no coincidence that you feel that inner calling towards something more authentic. It's your psyche seeking completeness, seeking to integrate that child you once were with the woman you are now. Often, the first step is the most difficult, recognizing there's a part of you that has been waiting to be heard. Jung identified this as the moment when we begin to see our shadow, that aspect of ourselves we've repressed. It can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it's profoundly liberating. Your inner child has much to tell you. Perhaps she wants you to know it wasn't your fault, that you did the best you could with what you had at that moment. Jung taught us that many of our adult behaviors our unconscious attempts to protect that vulnerable child we once were. But now, as an adult, you have resources you didn't have then. You can give that child what she needed then: understanding, patience, unconditional love. Do you know what Jung discovered about early emotional wounds? That they tend to manifest in recurring patterns in our adult life. Perhaps you constantly find yourself in relationships where you don't feel valued, or maybe you tend to sabotage your own achievements when you're close to reaching them. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat, an unconscious attempt to resolve old traumas by recreating them over and over again. Breaking these patterns requires something Jung considered fundamental: consciousness. It's not enough to intellectually know something is happening. You need to feel it, experience it from your emotional center. That's why rational words rarely heal deep emotional wounds. We need to speak to that inner child in her own language, through symbols, images, genuine emotional connection. Jung developed what he called active imagination, a technique to consciously dialogue with parts of our unconscious. Imagine you can sit beside your inner child, take her hands in yours, and look into her eyes. What does she need to hear from you? What promises does she need you to keep? This internal dialogue isn't fantasy. According to Jung, it's one of the most powerful methods for integrating fragmented aspects of our psyche. Dear inner child, perhaps you've been waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to feel, that your emotions, all of them, are valuable messengers, not enemies to suppress. Jung understood that our negative emotions are as important as the positive ones. Sadness, fear, even anger are signals showing us where we need to pay attention, where there are wounds requiring healing. Many women grow up learning to repress their anger especially. Society teaches us that anger isn't feminine, that we should always be accommodating, always understanding. Jung would see this as a dangerous repression of what he called the shadow, those aspects of ourselves we consider unacceptable. But your inner child's anger is sacred. It's her way of telling you her boundaries were violated, her needs weren't respected. Have you ever wondered why you sometimes react disproportionately to seemingly minor situations? Jung would understand this as a constellation of a complex. Something in the present has activated an old wound. It's not the casual comment from a colleague that really hurts you. It's that the comment resonates with that time, many years ago, when someone important in your life made you feel you weren't enough. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward what Jung would call integration, that process of reconciling fragmented aspects of our psyche. It's not about eliminating parts of yourself, but understanding them, seeing how even your most challenging behaviors were attempts by your psyche to protect you, to help you survive. Your inner child also holds your purest gifts. Jung spoke of archetypes, those universal patterns that inhabit our collective unconscious. Among them is the divine child, that part of us connected with pure creativity, with the capacity for wonder, with unfiltered authenticity. When you reconnect with your inner child, you access not only your wounds, but also your innate talents, that spark of unique genius that no one else possesses. Think about the things you loved to do when you were little, before the world told you what was practical or realistic. Did you sing, draw, make up stories? Jung believed these early inclinations aren't coincidental. They're manifestations of what he called the self, that organizing center of our entire psyche that knows who we really are and where we should be heading. Many women abandon their early passions to follow more secure or socially accepted paths. Jung would see this as a betrayal of the individuation process, that natural tendency of the psyche toward the realization of our unique potential. When we ignore the calls of our soul, we pay a price, what Jung called neurosis, that state of internal disconnection that manifests as anxiety, depression, or a persistent feeling of emptiness. Your inner child knows your purpose. That vocation you felt before the world convinced you otherwise wasn't a childish fantasy. It was what Jung would call the voice of the self, that internal compass that always points toward our true nature. Reconciling with that child means recovering that clarity, that conviction you once had about your place in the world. Have you noticed how certain people or situations provoke intense emotional reactions in you, seemingly unjustified? Jung called this projection, that mechanism by which we attribute to others qualities we haven't recognized or integrated in ourselves. Often, what irritates us most in others is precisely what we don't want to see in ourselves, those parts of our shadow we've repressed. When a child grows up with the feeling that her needs aren't important, she develops what Jung would call an adaptive persona, a social mask designed to obtain the approval she craves. Over time, many women forget where this mask ends and where their authentic self begins. They become what others need, losing touch with their own desires and needs. Reconciling with your inner child means recognizing those adaptations, honoring them for how they helped you survive, but also being willing to let go of those that no longer serve you. Jung believed this type of psychological growth requires courage, the willingness to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our histories. One of the most powerful tools Jung left us for this internal work is attention to dreams. He considered dreams to be direct messages from our unconscious, often expressed in symbolic language that transcends ordinary logic. Many times, our inner child speaks to us through these nocturnal images, showing us aspects of ourselves that our conscious mind isn't yet ready to recognize directly. Paying attention to your dreams, especially recurring or emotionally charged ones, can offer you valuable clues about what your inner child is trying to communicate. Jung suggested keeping a dream journal, noting not only the details of the dream, but also the emotions they evoked. Over time, you'll begin to recognize patterns, personal symbols that have a unique meaning for you. Dear inner child, perhaps you've been waiting for permission to feel safe. Jung understood that many of our adult insecurities have roots in early experiences where we didn't feel protected or valued. He discovered that in our unconscious dwells what he called the mother archetype, that universal energy linked to nurturing, protection, and unconditional care. If you didn't receive enough of this maternal energy in your childhood, you may feel a persistent emptiness, a sense that something fundamental is missing. The good news is that, according to Jung, we can develop this capacity for self-mothering, for becoming that nurturing presence for our own inner child. It's not a replacement for what you didn't receive, but it's a path toward healing. A powerful way to begin this process is to ask yourself, what did this child need to hear when she was 5 years old? What did she need at 7, at 10? And then give yourself permission to say those words now. Jung understood that it's never too late to rewrite the internal narratives we formed in our childhood. Sometimes, your inner child's pain can manifest as relentless self-criticism. Jung would identify this as the internalized parental shadow, those critical voices we absorbed from authority figures and eventually adopted as our own. Over time, we no longer need others to criticize us. We've become our own harshest judges. Transforming this internal relationship requires something Jung considered essential: compassion. Not superficial compassion, but that deep understanding that we all do the best we can with what we have at each moment. Your inner child wasn't too sensitive, too intense, or too anything. She was perfectly herself, responding to the world with the limited tools she had. Jung discovered that many of our deepest wounds are related to what he called love wounds. Not just romantic love, but that fundamental need to feel valuable, to know that we matter. When a child grows up feeling that her worth depends on her performance, her appearance, or her ability to please others, she develops what Jung would call an inferiority complex, that persistent feeling of not being enough. To heal these wounds, Jung proposed a process that goes beyond intellectual understanding. We need corrective experiences, moments when we can feel, not just think, that we are valuable regardless of our achievements or failures. This is the essence of what it means to truly love your inner child, offering her that unconditional acceptance she may not have received then. Do you know what Jung discovered about people who achieve this type of internal reconciliation? that they develop a quality he called authenticity, that capacity to live from their truth without a constant need for external approval. When you speak to your inner child with honesty and love, you're modeling for her what it means to be true to yourself in a world that constantly asks you to be someone else. Sometimes, talking to your inner child can feel strange or uncomfortable at first. Jung would understand this as resistance, that natural tendency of the psyche to protect itself from changes that, although necessary, can feel threatening. It's like a muscle you haven't used in a long time. At first it might hurt, but with practice, it becomes stronger, more natural. A practice that Jung might recommend is writing letters to your inner child, not from your critical adult mind, but from that place of wisdom and compassion we all have. Tell her what you see in her, what you admire about her resilience, her ability to maintain hope even in difficult circumstances, and then give yourself permission to write a response from her. It's surprising the wisdom that can emerge from this internal dialogue. Dear inner child, perhaps you've been waiting for someone to see your light. Jung believed that we are all born with what he called an innate potential, that unique spark that only we can bring to the world. When life circumstances force us to repress essential aspects of who we are, that light doesn't extinguish. It simply hides, waiting for the right moment to shine again. Jung observed that many people experience what he called the midlife crisis. That moment when the strategies that have worked for us until now begin to fail, when existential questions become impossible to ignore. Often, this crisis is actually a call from our inner child, reminding us of those essential parts of ourselves we've left behind in our pursuit of success or acceptance. Have you noticed how certain themes, certain images or situations seem to pursue you throughout your life? Jung called these recurring motifs and saw them as important clues about our individuation process. If you pay attention, you'll notice that your inner child uses these patterns as a language, trying to communicate something essential about who you are and what you need to feel complete. One of the most common childhood wounds, according to Jung, is what we might call the authenticity wound. It occurs when we learn that parts of us are not acceptable, that we must hide aspects of our nature to be loved. Over time, this concealment becomes so habitual that we lose touch with our authentic self, with what Jung would call the self. Reconciling with your inner child means reclaiming those parts of you that were silenced or rejected. Not to become a child again, but to integrate the spontaneity, creativity, and authenticity of childhood with the wisdom and capacity of your adult self. Jung saw this process as coming full circle, a conscious return to our essential nature. Do you know what allows this type of growth? What Jung called the symbolic attitude, that capacity to see beyond the literal, to recognize that each event, each emotion, each challenge in our life can be both a problem to solve and a symbol that reveals something deeper about ourselves. Your inner child communicates primarily through symbols, not rational analysis. She feels more than she thinks. She dreams more than she plans. Jung taught us that honoring this form of knowledge, what he called intuitive thinking, is essential for our complete psychological well-being. It's not about abandoning reason, but complementing it with this deeper and often quieter wisdom. One of the great barriers to reconnecting with our inner child is fear. Fear of what we might discover, fear of the intense feelings that might emerge, fear of losing control. Jung understood that this fear is natural. After all, we've built psychological defenses for good reasons. But he also showed us that what we most fear facing is often exactly what we most need for our healing. Jung discovered something fascinating about the process of healing our internal wounds. He called it enantiodromia, that tendency of the psyche to transform an experience into its opposite when it reaches an extreme point. Thus, our deepest wounds, when finally recognized and embraced, can become our greatest strengths, the unique gifts we offer to the world. Dear inner child, perhaps you've been waiting for someone to tell you that your dreams matter. Jung firmly believed in what he called the principle of finality, the idea that our psyche always moves toward wholeness, toward the realization of our unique potential. When we abandon our most genuine dreams, we not only betray ourselves, we interfere with this natural impulse toward our highest destiny. Many women grow up with contradictory messages about what it means to be successful. Jung would understand this as a conflict between the social persona, the mask we wear to fit in, and the self, our essential nature. When we live primarily from our persona, we can achieve what the world defines as success, but at the cost of a deep internal disconnection. Reconciling with your inner child means redefining success on your own terms, not those that were instilled in you, not those that society values, but those that resonate with your deepest truth. Jung believed that each person has a personal myth, a unique narrative that gives meaning and purpose to their existence. Reconnecting with your inner child helps you rediscover that myth, to remember what you came here to do. Have you noticed how certain situations or people seem to emotionally trigger you in ways you can't rationally explain? Jung called these emotional triggers and saw them as windows into our unhealed wounds. Every time you react disproportionately, your inner child is trying to communicate something important about a pain she still carries inside. One of the most powerful tools Jung left us for this internal work is symbolic amplification, that capacity to explore a symbol or emotion by following its ramifications, allowing it to reveal its multiple layers of meaning. When an intense emotion arises, instead of suppressing or rationalizing it, you can ask yourself, what does this remind me of? When did I first feel something similar? Jung discovered that many of our deepest wounds are related to what he called the belonging wound, that fundamental need to feel part of something greater than ourselves. When a child grows up feeling that somehow she is different, too much, or not enough to fit in, she develops adaptation strategies that can distance us from our essence. Healing this wound requires something Jung considered essential: community. Not just any community, but spaces where we can be seen and valued in our totality, where we don't need to hide parts of ourselves to be accepted. In these authentic relationships, our inner child finally finds that sense of belonging she has so longed for. Dear inner child, perhaps you've been waiting for permission to play again. Jung understood play not as a trivial activity, but as an expression of what he called the transcendent function, that innate capacity of the psyche to create new possibilities, to transcend apparent dichotomies and discover innovative solutions. Many adults lose this capacity for genuine play, becoming trapped in what Jung would call unilateral seriousness, that tendency to over-identify with our social roles and responsibilities. Reconciling with your inner child means recovering that lightness, that capacity to see life not just as a series of problems to solve, but as an adventure to explore. Jung discovered that play is intimately connected with what he called the creative function, that part of us capable of bringing something new into the world. When we reconnect with our capacity to play without an ulterior purpose, we open channels for this creativity to flow naturally, often solving problems that our rational mind couldn't solve. One of the most powerful ways to reconnect with your inner child is through what Jung would call synchronicities, those meaningful events that occur without an apparent causal connection. When you begin to pay attention to these coincidences, you discover that the universe seems to be communicating with you in a language of symbols and metaphors, very similar to the language of your inner child. Dear inner child, I want you to know something important. The healing process is not linear. Jung understood that what he called the path of individuation is not an orderly progression of stages, but a spiral that sometimes leads us to revisit old wounds from new levels of understanding. Don't be discouraged if you find yourself dealing with emotions you thought you had overcome. It's part of the process of deep integration that your psyche is orchestrating. The most beautiful thing Jung discovered about this process is that it has a purpose beyond our individual well-being. He believed that when we heal our internal wounds, when we integrate our shadows and reconcile the fragmented aspects of our psyche, we not only transform ourselves, we contribute to collective healing. Every time you speak with love to your inner child, you're creating waves of healing that extend far beyond yourself. This is the most precious gift you can give yourself and the world. The courage to see, hear, and embrace that child who has always been there, waiting for you to recognize her. Not as an intellectual exercise, but as an act of revolutionary love that fundamentally changes how you relate to yourself and to everyone around you. The letter to your inner child doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to follow strict rules or meet external expectations. It just needs to be authentic, to come from that place of truth that Jung would call the heart. Because ultimately, what your inner child most yearns for is precisely that: to be seen, to be heard, and to be loved exactly as she is, without conditions or expectations. Are you ready to write that letter? To open that dialogue that can transform not only your relationship with yourself, but also all your external relationships? Jung taught us that the most important journey we will ever undertake is this: the conscious return to our own essence, to that divine spark that is at the very center of who we are. If this message has resonated with some part of your being, if you felt something move within you as you listened to these words, it's no coincidence. Jung would call this a moment of synchronicity, a meaningful encounter between your internal search and something external that reflects that search. Your inner child has been touched, and now she invites you to continue this sacred dialogue. I invite you to share in the comments how these words have resonated with you. What would you say to your inner child if you could speak directly to her now? Each time you express these truths, you not only advance on your own healing path, you offer a light that can guide others on their journey. If this message has touched you, share it with someone you think might need to hear it. Sometimes a simple conversation, a shared video, can be the catalyst for profound personal transformation. And if you haven't already, I invite you to join this community by subscribing to this channel and turning on notifications to continue this journey of internal discovery together. Remember that you are not alone on this path. Jung discovered that although the individuation process is deeply personal, it also connects us with something universal, with that shared network of human experience that transcends time and space. In this sense, each step you take toward reconciliation with your inner child is a step we all take together, toward a more conscious, more compassionate, and more authentic world. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this sacred dialogue. The words that open the heart of your inner child are already within you, waiting to be discovered. And when you finally find them, when you pronounce those words of unconditional love toward yourself, you'll discover that you have always been complete. You have always been enough. You have always been exactly who you needed to be. This is the most profound message Carl Jung left us, that the path to wholeness is not an external search, but a return home to that divine essence you have never ceased to be.